Luxor Temple is that grand temple situated by the Corniche Street by the Nile in Luxor city. It's one of two major temples that are visited by tourists throughout the whole year in Egypt. This temple was built by King Ramesses II and King Amun-Hotep III. So there used to be 4 statues standing in front of the temple representing the king. But after restoration, now all the 6 statues are standing. It is remarked by the obelisk in front of it. There used to be 2 obelisks. One of them is here in front of the temple in its original place, and the other one is in the Concorde Square in Paris. So when you come to visit Luxor, you need to pass by Luxor Temple and learn a lot about the Egyptian pharaohs. The credit of building Luxor Temple in its present form, on one axis from north to south, on the east bank of the Nile, goes to King Amun-Hotep III, one of the 18th dynasty's kings. Later in the 19th dynasty, King Ramesses II added a great pylon to the front and a wide open court behind it with papyrus columns. It's possible that the first kernel of this temple was placed in the Middle Kingdom era, but we're not sure where it was, for it was completely destroyed. Beyond doubt, Amun-Hotep III preferred to build his temple on the ruins of that ancient sacred chapel which existed in the Middle Kingdom, most probably in the 12th dynasty. Besides, Queen Hatshepsut and King Thutmose III had constructed a small building composed of 3 chapels dedicated to the triad of Thebes. It still exists today, right behind Ramesses II pylon to the right of the entrance. It's also possible that King Ramses had reconstructed these chapels in their exact location and recorded his name on them. The front pylon of the temple was built by King Ramses II. It's intersected by the main entrance and headed by 6 giant statues representing himself. 2 on both sides of the entrance represent him sitting, and 2 standing statues used to be beside each of the seated 2. Today, the seated 14 meters high statues exist in addition to just one of the standing ones on the extreme right side. Ramesses has also erected 2 great obelisks in front of the temple. Each is 22.2 meters high. In 1836, the second obelisk was taken from here and sent to Paris as a gift from King Muhammad Ali to King Philippe of France. It stands today in the Concorde Square in Paris, and thus the original complete majestic view of Luxor Temple was destroyed somehow for a whim of a king who wasn't of an Egyptian origin. The monkeys that cheer for the sun are carved on the base of the obelisk. An avenue of sphinxes is found in front of the pylon. It was constructed by Nectanebo, one of the 30th dynasty's kings, and it used to lead to Khonso Temple, south to Karnak. It may have replaced the avenue of sphinxes constructed by Amenophis III. The sunk reliefs on the facade of the pylon, which is 65 meters wide, describe the wars of Ramesses II against the Hittites on the 5th year of his reign. In the middle of the pylon, we see the camp where he defeated his enemies Then he is seen standing on his chariot during the battle fighting the Hittites. On the left pylon, Ramesses II stands on his war chariot, shooting at his enemies with a shower of arrows, and the ground is covered with the dead and the wounded, while the alive ones escape in panic and leave Kadesh. A full description of this battle was written in hieroglyphics in a poetic verse by the poet Pentaur. It's found on the bottom half of the pylon, starting from the right and ending on the left. The four recesses of the pylon were designed for the placement of the flagpoles, and four square openings are on the top of the pylon to fixate these poles. The dimensions of the open court behind the pylon is 57 by 51 meters, with 74 columns erected in two lines, ending by papyrus capitals. In between the southern columns of the court are statues of Ramesses II. Some represent him standing and others sitting, like the double statues seated on the sides of the entrance that lead to the Great Aisle, constructed by Amun-Hotep III. These two giant statues represent King Ramesses II sitting on the throne in glory. They are decorated with the scene of God Habi, represented twice as a symbol of the Nile in its fertility form. He holds both ropes that end with the lotus and papyrus flowers, which symbolize north and south of Egypt. He makes a knot where they meet so tight by pushing it with his feet. The knot and the two flowers are called Sema Tawi, or the unification of the two lands. The lower part of the throne has scenes of the enemies of Egypt. One statue has reliefs of the African enemies, and the other has the Asian enemies. Their hands are tied behind their backs with one long rope joining them together. Each enemy's city name is written on his shield, and they form an important source of history. The Mosque of Abu al-Haggag lies on the northeast of the court. It was built in the 12th century according to the Fatimid style, on the honor of a Muslim sheikh who came from Morocco. At that time, Luxor Temple was covered with rubble and sand till the base of the mosque. After the exploration of the temple and its cleaning, a new mosque carrying the same name was constructed at the end of the Avenue of Sphinxes. Unwilling to leave the old mosque, the locals of today pray in both mosques. The walls behind the standing statues of Ramesses II bear reliefs of the king in relationship with gods, presenting them offerings. Other scenes are of the defeated enemies, but the most important scene is that which shows the complete facade of Luxor Temple, which is a pylon with its 6 statues and flags and 2 obelisks. In this important scene, a religious procession is shown heading towards the temple. It's composed of 17 of Ramesses II's sons, marching ahead of noblemen who lead a herd of fat sacrificial bulls. Ramesses II has called his open court the Temple of Ra Messo, united forever. Right behind the court of Ramesses II lie the remainings of the pylon which used to be the original entrance of Luxor Temple during Amenophes III time. It's followed by the majestic colonnade that's composed of 2 rows of great papyrus columns. Each row has 7 columns that end with an open papyrus capital. Each column is 16 meters and set an example of the impressive giant Egyptian architecture, which is in the same time strong enough to hold till today. It's a matter of debate whether the king intended to compose a big colonnade with additional columns on the sides but died before the plan was completed, or the aisle was meant to stay that way, just like what the architect Engelbach suggested in 1924. In all cases, the work in the colonnade was completed and finished during the reign of King Tutankhamun and later his successor, King Hur-Imhab. The scenes on its walls are of great importance, as they describe the annual festivals of the anniversary of god Amun and his wife goddess Mut. In that festival, called Opet, the sacred bark of Amun leaves Karnak Temple and sails in the Nile to the south, where Luxor Temple is. That's why the procession on the walls starts on the north of the western wall and continues south till the end of the wall, then continues from the extreme south of the eastern wall north to its end. The scenes of the festival show the great bark of Amun carried on the shoulders of his priests from Karnak to the Nile, where it was placed on a big sailing boat in a great religious and popular celebration. Food and wine and beer were distributed on all the people, who sang and danced with joy. Finally, and after 11 days, Amun's bark returns to his sanctuary in Karnak, sealing one of the most important festivals of ancient Egypt. King Amun-Hotep III ordered the construction of Luxor Temple for the triad gods of Thebes on the location of the ruins of the Middle Kingdom Temple in 1360 BC. There were 2 reasons behind his order, the first of which is to reassure his kinship to god Amun himself, as his rights to sit on the throne were incomplete when the royal Egyptian tradition stated that the pharaoh had to be a son of a king and a queen, or married to a princess of pure royal blood. Neither conditions applied on Amun-Hotep III, having a foreign mother and a wife from the common people called Ti. After the death of his father, he consulted with the priests of god Amun to legalize his claim of the throne by relating himself directly to god Amun as a son. They came up with a story similar to the story of the divine birth of Queen Hatshepsut and recorded it on the walls of the birth chapel in Luxor Temple. The story simply says that god Amun revealed himself to Amun-Hotep's mother, Mutim-Uya, as a human in the image of her husband, Thutmose IV. So she had a relation with him and gave birth to a male, whom he called Amun-Hotep, which means god Amun is content. This story proves that his road to the throne wasn't smoothly paved, and it gave him a priority and advantage to all the previous pharaohs, for he is a direct descendant from Ammon himself. This leads to the second purpose of building the temple, which is satisfying the priests of Ammon and expanding their power by building a great temple for Ammon. The great open court of Amenophis III is 51 meters wide by 45 meters. It's the highlight of the temple, with its splendid columns that were erected in the eastern and western and northern sides. There are a total of 64 columns, taking the shape of bunches of papyrus plants with closed capitals. They set an example of the beauty and perfection of the ancient Egyptian art of architecture. The apexes on top of the columns used to hold the ceiling, which stones almost fell completely. It used to allow beams of light designed to show shades to the columns, which are lined in 2 rows specially for that purpose. The open court was dedicated to the religious celebrations in which the people participated. That's why it's called the Celebrations Court. A room behind the sanctuary leads to the birth chapel of the king. After the marriage of his mother to god Ammon, she got pregnant and delivered him. 3 rows describe this sacred delivery with the help of goddesses, especially goddess Hekat, a female with a frog head, the goddess of delivery. Then, an important scene shows the final outcome of that sacred story, when God Khnum, the ram-headed god, sits on the potter's wheel and makes the baby of Amun-Hotep and his double, the Ka, out of mud and water. Later, goddess Hathor gives him life, represented in the Ankh symbol. With that scene, Amenophis III successfully achieved his main purpose of building the temple and earned the right to sit on the throne of Egypt. In his pursuit to this sacred mission of keeping the throne within his family, he left us with the most prominent architectural achievement in the ancient Egyptian history, Luxor Temple.